26 years ago today, March 21st, a little boy named Yohance Clark was beaten into a coma in Bridgeport just for being black. Today, Chicago, we welcome Yohance Lacour. He's a writer from the South Side who's committed to telling stories of black Chicago from the ground. You might have seen him featured in New York City Magazine, Chicago Tribune, Inside Look, and Smithsonian Magazine. And he's here to discuss his heartfelt podcast known as You Didn't See Nothing. How you doing?
Good, bro. I'm real good, man. It's good to be here, man. Appreciate it.
No problem. And then on board, got a very special guest with me today, Ariel Mejia, Vocalo community and audio storytelling producer. And it's your 1-year anniversary, lady.
Oh, thank you, Bekoe. And so glad you're here, Yohance. What's up?
Yes.
Appreciate you.
So right off back, this podcast, brother, You Didn't See Nothing. It's beautiful to hear it, first and foremost, like the research you've done, the people you've connected with, and just the storytelling to let everybody know the history of what took place on this day 26 years ago. I got to give you another round of applause for that because it was beautiful to hear, and it made me want more and more from your storytelling skills. So, I got to know, man, tell us a little bit about how you became a street journalist.
Man, my man, thank you, man. Thank you for the praise, bro. It's appreciated. So I've been a writer, kind of since forever, man. My father had me reading Time magazine at 2 and 3 years old. Take me to family reunions. They thought I was some sort of child prodigy genius because I'm, reading Encyclopedia Britannicas for the family at 3, right? I didn't know what none of it meant, but I knew where the commas and the periods were and how to pronounce everything. And so I've been in love with books and reading, and I was a bookworm as a baby, and so writing just followed. And so I was writing raps and poems and little comic books and all type of stuff coming up. And so then, once I got older, man, I would write. I had a friend of mine, his name was Jabez Bishop, may he rest in peace. His mama, Diane Bishop, started a magazine, an online magazine called NSYNC Chicago. And I did some fluff pieces for that. It was just really exciting to get published somewhere. But I hadn't written anything that had been published that was but so serious. Then when in '97, when Yohance Clark was attacked, one of my best friends, Rasan Gordon, who was a phenomenal lawyer writing that, doing his thing, he called me that morning. This is the son of Panthers, and he come from the struggle. You know what I'm saying? So he called me that morning, and told me what happened, and so we was just outraged. And so we went we actually, initially our first instinct was to, go put hands on somebody. And that ain't, it just didn't work, man. You got 5, 6 black dudes rolling up in Bridgeport they not gonna see us coming. So, we was on one.
What made you change the initiative of going from putting hands on somebody to putting words on that pad?
My father and the attempt to put hands on somebody wasn't working. We got over there and we were just outnumbered. And so we went home.
So y'all did still try to put some hands on.
Oh yeah, we tried it. But yeah, it wasn't gonna work for us. So I went home, but it was still, I was still very upset. You know what I'm saying? Very angry. And my father, obviously, like I tell you, he taught me how to read, so he knew I was a writer. So he told me I should write about it if I was, that passionate about doing something about it. And he put me in tune with a local newspaper called the South Street Journal. It was run by a brother named Ron Carter out of Robert Taylor Homes, who was also just passionate and had seen so much and wanted to create an outlet and do something with his own anger and emotion around, how we've been getting treated for so long. And so I got with him, and he was able to put me in tune with everybody I needed to talk to report on this story, man. That was the beginning of my street journalism career.
That's really cool, of course. Oh, my God. I love this show so much. I just want to say.
Thank
and
you.
There's a line that I really love, and it kind of talks, to follow up what you're talking about is you're asking, first of all, you ask a lot of questions as the narrator, as a storyteller, which I think is so beautiful. And one of them is what's the difference between a journalist and a snitch? And you move through that. And I kind of just wanted to hear more about that question and why you asked that and what that really means.
Yeah, that was kind of deep. I want to just backtrack two or three sentences in terms of you applauding all of the research that I did. Man, I had a team that was just amazing from the Invisible Institute, the audio podcast team there.
Can you explain what the Invisible Institute is?
Oh, I'm about to. Yeah. No, the Invisible Institute, it's a journalism organization on the south side of Chicago, and they are dedicated to reporting out stories and basically fighting through journalism for black folks, brown folks, people in Chicago, people who getting their human rights violated, mainly by police, but generally, by the conditions in general. And so Sarah Geis, Irissa Apantaku, Bill Healy, Dana Brozos Kelleher. I mean, that was like, I tell people like they were my Dr. Dre. You know what I'm saying? You see rappers talk about how Dr. Dre got them right. Snoop got in the studio. He told them how to rap and when to drop the punchlines and when to hit this on that beat or whatever. They were my Dr. Dre, and Allison Flowers and Jamie Calvin, who kind of, basically kind of run and operate, founded the Invisible Institute, oversaw a lot of the project. And so it was no way, the story that people have fallen in love with could have come together without them. But in terms of to address the journalism snitch
like
kind
about
of
truth
conundrum.
and telling the truth and finding the truth,
Yeah, it was, for me, having done so much time in the joint and so much time prior to that, just on the streets hustling, you're one of your number one enemies becomes snitches and rats. There is a code, and I respect that code even to this day. If you and I concoct a plan and I get caught and I tell on you so I don't, face whatever punishment I got coming, which I knew I would have had coming, that's rat business activity, and I don't respect it. And so at the same time, if you and I haven't concocted a plan together, but I put my nose in your business and send you to prison or get you punished for something that I may have done myself, even, or that that I'm not threatened by, that's snitch activity, And so and then you can take it too far, honestly. You know what I'm saying? You can go too far. But when you're talking about as snitching and ratting as we know it is about telling the police on people, and the police are just they're an enemy of peace. And so that they're not, what they've been made out to be or what they claim to be or profess to be. And so sending anybody to the joint for me is just, it's unthinkable. And so as a journalist, though, you're uncovering crimes and you're uncovering stories that could lead to folks' punishment. And so in this particular case, in this particular situation, and then, my father also told me the devil is in the details, right? So I'm not the guy who feels like if there's a rapist next door to me that I can't handle myself, I'm just going to let him go because I don't want to tell them. I'm not him, right? However, I don't know if I call the police, I might call the guys, you know what I mean? But that's just, that's my Chicago way. Anyway, this particular situation, I felt like going too far into an investigation of a murder that was associated with this story would have likely could have possibly sent some black men to prison who I think were just used as pawns. And it goes back to another question that the brilliant Marsha Chatelain brought up in the podcast, which is about Black life being a series of negotiations that force us to evaluate what our life is worth. And I feel like from everything I could see from the little research that we did do in terms of this crime, the brothers who may have committed it, whom I don't know because we didn't investigate far enough to see, because I didn't want to know at that point, right? Because the journalist, as you probably also heard, it was Jamie Calvin, who runs the Invisible Institute, who basically was kind of like, if you find out who committed a certain crime, it's your obligation as an ethical journalist to say something. And so if I don't know, I can't tell. So I just, continue to kind of mind my business there. But to make this long story short, I felt like the brothers who could have been implicated in this crime were probably men who were forced into those negotiations to figure out what their life was worth, and so they were pawns, and I didn't want no part in it.
Now, before we jump into this break, with the Leonard case taking place, do you feel like that helped you understand more what journalism was and is?
Wow, yeah. Yeah, and more than that, man, all of these years later, it's helped me understand how far journalism has come and what it can be. You know, with the advent of social media, and all of these means through which we can, you know, push our voices to so many different ears, journalism is something that it wasn't in 1997. In 1997, man, you know, around cases like this at least, truth tellers, I would say, if they weren't silenced, their voices were just omitted, right? Because there was no way, looking back, man, it wasn't just my young pride. There's no way I'm uncovering the type of details and facts around this case I was uncovering, and it doesn't make bigger headlines. The president of the United States was talking about this case. So then you got a local newspaper out the projects with some black kid at a black-run newspaper finding out there are 3 more attackers than you knew of, and this news don't hit nobody, it don't get nowhere. You know what I mean? So I was frustrated, and I was done with it. I was like, you know, it doesn't work, man. I want to have an impact. You know what I'm saying? I was making money in the street. I would have loved to replace that revenue, that income with legal income with doing something like this, but not if it wasn't going to have no impact. I could have stayed in college and just worked for somebody and made them some money. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I was frustrated and done with journalism until I came home. And like I say, like, you know, I got in tune with the Invisible Institute, and they ain't the only, you know, journalism organization. You got rogue journalists online now. I mean, you can just do a lot more. It's a lot more information being spread. But I can say the research and they do there, and the credibility is amazing. And so yeah, it feels good to be in a place where real journalism is really happening and really effective.
And so right now, we're going to play a little clip from the show. So we just talked about an article Yohance wrote. After that dropped, he thought he'd get some attention from other journalists in Chicago because the article contained facts he hadn't seen reported anywhere else. That did not happen, and instead, some other folks came with some unwanted attention. Here's a clip.
A couple days later, I went back to the South Street Journal office to grab more copies of the paper. I didn't have a driver's license at the time, so Earl, my playwriting partner, he drove me. He had this magenta Mercury Tracer. We used to call her Tracy.
Yeah, so we pulled up at that spot. I never forget, in my red Tracer.
It was fuchsia.
We pulled up on that spot, and I'm like, they looking for you?
I'm like, hold on. I see like 4 or 5 guys, Italian-looking cats, big old white dudes. Now, they're across the street getting out of their car. They were in like a dark Crown Vic or a Lincoln Continental or something. It's real out of place because they're the only white dudes for blocks. And they ain't mailmen or nothing like that or cops. It turned out my article did get some attention. Just not how I was hoping it would.
Hearing that, my brother, hearing that, like how before we came in to the break, I was asking you about, like, you know, did you learn more about journalism from, you know, taking the case? Now we see that the report was so impactful. You got men looking for you. So for you, you know, knowing that your article had reached literally, how was that for you, knowing that, oh man, I done put together something and now my life could possibly be on the line for doing this?
It was exciting.
What?
I mean, well, you think about what excitement means. You know what I mean? Excitement gets your heart beating faster. You know what I mean? It was exciting. I wasn't a stranger to danger or excitement. I was in the streets already, but you know, man, I had always felt like, man, you know, so I'm young. I'm 23. I'm listening to way too much Tupac, drinking way too much Hennessy, and smoking way too much weed. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, it was a crazy vibe in 97. Fresh off Pac, he had just passed. So now we riding extra hard, and his whole, you know, if you remember, man, Pac and Big, they had their thing was dark, man. If I die tonight, and death around the corner, and so, you know, you thought about and considered, you know, your mortality daily, especially if you was in the streets. So honestly, it's like, well, if I was to go out, I'd rather go out in a battle for black people than with black people. You know what I'm saying? So it was a crazy feeling. At the same time, it was sobering. Like, oh, it's real. You know what I'm saying? Like, we wanted to go lay hands on somebody. That didn't work. I'm writing. I'm thinking I'm taking the square route, and here the straight and narrow kind of route. And here we are in dealing with, you know, some threats and some possibilities that's deeper than what we had planned for when we was gonna fight fire with fire. So it was a mix of emotions, man.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure it was. Listening to episode 2, I felt it. Like you can literally feel what you went through, and not even just what you went through, what the family of Clark went through. You know what I'm saying? The Clark family. So I got to know too. Like, with putting together, you didn't see nothing. Break down why it's important for the community to know about this day here.
Man, it's important. It's important to know about this day because it keeps repeating itself. It's like a Groundhog Day for us. You know what I mean? Like, you know, it's like I tell people often. Leonard wasn't the first of his kind, and he wasn't the last. And we have seen he was actually fortunate to have not been murdered, because he could have. His life was hanging in the balance for days after the attack. We didn't know if he was going to survive, so we just got to thank God he did, right? But there's so many black men, women, and children who haven't. And this story is playing out similarly over and over again, and has been. And so it's important to hear this story. One, because today, I think it sheds light on the fact that today we got more tools than we had then. Now we fighting bigger forces also, because they got them tools too. But at the end of the day, you know, it's important to know how this thing has been playing out, so we know how to read it when it happens again.
You know, something that's deep to me, to know that this took place 26 years ago. That's right around the corner. That didn't happen too long ago. Mm-hmm. 26 years ago, this happened here on this date. And, you know, and like you said, you don't want to see history repeat itself. So what's something that the community, what's something that further journalists can do to, you know, at least keep us astray from this happening again?
I think we got to expose the truth everywhere we see it, and we got to stop. As journalists, we got to stop taking such this whole unbiased approach. I mean, we getting murdered out here, man. We getting hurt. How can you report on the murder of people who look like you and could be you, and do it from a unbiased point of view? There's no way I can be unbiased talking about people who are trying to kill me, right? But it is what it is, and it's real. So we got to take that passion and speak truth to power. And as far as the community, man, we got a lot of issues to work out, and we got to start working them out ASAP, because the other side is working them out for us.
So we're about to play another clip, and here we hear some of Johan's conversation with Dr. Marcia Chatelain, who she's a professor at Georgetown University now, but back in '97, she was just a high school in Chicago, and the Leonard Clark story really impacted her, just like it did Johan's. A big part of the podcast is Johan's thinking about the idea of quote-unquote sellouts, what it means, what it looks like, and Johan's was really struck by what Dr. Chatelain had to say about selling out.
Black life is a series of negotiations that force us to evaluate what our life is worth.
Damn. Black life is a series of negotiations that force us to evaluate what our life is worth. Some days I'm still mad as hell at these black folks who sided with Lil Frankie and his father. And other days I'm like, they victims too. Don't get me wrong. They made choices. They chose to rock with powerful white men over an innocent little black boy. But why do we live in a society where black folks got to make these calculations?
So I'd love to hear about, you know, how you feel about this conversation, you know, connecting with someone who back in '97, what she was at that time, and also just the decision to include your life story and yourself. It's the relevance and that weaved in and out of your investigative reporting and your memories.
Yeah, those questions are definitely tied together well too. It was refreshing and validating and enlightening and inspiring to talk to Dr. Chatelain, because this was someone who this case stayed with her. You know what I mean? As we spoke, when she remarked on how closely this story stayed with her, it gave her nightmares as a child, right? And she was obviously younger than I was. She was in high school. I was 23 years old. And it impacted her greatly. And so that was big. And then that quote kind of just like the universe came together. God conspired to work for this podcast, man, because that quote just was the cherry on top. It was like, okay, you've articulated what I've been trying to put to words for quite a long time. So it was evident that this thing and these concepts and dynamics had been on her mind for a long time. It was evident that she'd been given a lot of thought and she's brilliant. So it just came together masterfully. In terms of adding my own story, that kind of ties into the sellout portion too, because I addressed it in the podcast that I sold dope and that ain't as a person about his people, knowing what we up against as black folks in America. That's ain't nothing revolutionary or positive about that. And so by my own definition, given what I know, right? Given what I know and where my heart is, it's a sellout move, right? In terms of kind of looking at the brothers that I considered and labeled sellouts at the time as victims themselves, it makes me think about the argument that goes back and forth when black folks are up in arms and outraged about the lives we losing at the hands of police and white folks and white supremacy and racism. We get responses like, well, what about black folks killing each other in the streets all the time? And that's something we deal with, and it's hard. It's hard for us to deal with because these are our children, and we understand, how lost, impoverished, ignorant, uneducated, uninformed, and led astray they are. And so, when you look at that, you realize they're victims, and it's a heck of a dynamic to be sitting here threatened and sometimes in fear of people who are basically your children because you still love them, right? And so you see the victimhood there, right? And so you forgive them to a degree, right? And so it's different than forgiving the folks who put all of y'all in the situation, right? And so, in America, man, everybody sells out to a degree every day. I mean, we talk about low-wage workers, and then we go buy from Amazon, right? And so, but when you are, like, among the most oppressed population here, and you the center of that oppression's target, then, those moves are just more striking, more dynamic.
Word. It kind of feels like part of how you wrap the show, and I won't, not too many spoilers because we couldn't recommend the show more, but, you get into the idea of racial reconciliation and the possibility of it is key. I mean, that also is how the show starts. I mean, people pivot immediately from paying attention to the crime to talking about racial reconciliation and kind of answering that question. And, we only got a few minutes left, but I really just want to hear you kind of talk to that.
Marsha Chatelain speaks to that profoundly as well, and I'm going to sum it up real quick. If I take your legs from you, it's my job to push you around every day because you can't never get nowhere for the rest of your life because of me, and I can, and I'm the reason you can't, so I owe you that. And until I show that I'm willing to give you that, it ain't really no reconciliation because I'm not being real about it. I'm doing it when it's convenient. So the possibility of racial reconciliation rests in the hands of white America and the folks who are responsible for this whole ugly picture. Real quick, I appreciate you for pushing the podcast. Really need people to rate and review it wherever they watch it because that's gonna send us up through the charts, and we kind of ascending anyway. And so we just got word of that today, which feels good. And so the more people rate and review it, and don't, the better it'll do, and the more the word to get out, and the more we can have these conversations.
You got to let people know the title again, my brother, and the website, all that, so they can find and rate.
My man, You Didn't See Nothing. It's on Apple, it's on Stitcher, it's on Spotify, usgaudio.com. You can go there and get it from whatever device you're working with. You Didn't See Nothing. Hosted by me, Yohance Lacour, produced by the Invisible Institute and USG Audio, usgaudio.com, Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you listen to audio podcasts.
Can people find you on the net as well?
Yeah, I'm on, I just got on Twitter at Yohance Lacour. I'm on Instagram at Yohance Lacour, Facebook, Yohance Lacour. And I'm just starting to get more engaged with social media. I've been gone, you know what I'm saying? And so, and I've been, but I'm out here now. And so, yeah, I'm there.
I like to hear, man. I greatly appreciate you taking our time to stop on by, share your story, share the podcast. You ain't seen nothing. Beautiful. Like I said, the episodes, the way it's put together is amazing, and it make you want more. It literally sounds like a film on audio.
Yes.
Hey, man, that's what I wanted. Hey, look, I told Sarah Geis, one of our producers, when I first started, I ain't know nothing about a podcast, hadn't heard one. I'm like, I want this thing to feel like a classic 90s hip-hop album meets a motion picture, man, and we did it.
Yes.
We did it, y'all. But, man, thank you. Man, thank you for having me, man, and thank you for giving this story some shine.
No problem, man. Chicago, that was Yohance Lacour. Y'all definitely go check out You Didn't See Nothing. It is out right now.